Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's Tuesday, the 11th of February. This is the Morning Blast. Let's get Mr. Michael Brown up on the mic. Whilst he's joining, I will do the legals. As usual, nothing discussed on this space session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ Global Limited, Trains PIQ or PIQ Suite, or indeed the hosts, which, as you know by now, is Mr. Michael Brown and myself, Mr. Ryan Paisley. I'm sorry for not being around yesterday, but I was travelling. Mr. Michael Brown, how are you?
Good morning, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing? I just saw that picture of you on the front page of the paper this morning.
Yes. It was a very good protest yesterday. Thank you. Up the farmers.
It was actually, he was a little bit tall to be you, to be fair.
Yeah. Also, I've got nothing against gingers, but I'm not ginger.
Now, come on. There's a protected characteristic there, I'm sure.
Perhaps. What's been going on, my dear friend?
Oh, indeed. Right. Good morning, everyone. Interestingly, it was a little bit of a subdued start to the week, at least in terms of price action, although there was, of course, a barrage of headlines once again. The orange man in the Oval Office can't go a day without being the centre of attention, and we'll rattle through what he had to say momentarily. But in terms of those market moves, we did see a sort of slow and steady grind higher in the equity space, the S&P 500 closing higher by around about 0.75%, and the tech sector leading the way with the Nasdaq up by about 1.2%. But elsewhere, things were relatively quiet. Treasuries just kind of treading water, really, for the majority of the day, with the 10-year yield hovering a few basis points either side of 4.5%, and the 2-year yield hovering a few basis points either side of 4.25%. And that led to pretty subdued conditions in the foreign exchange space as well, with the dollar index unchanged around 108.30, and other G10s also experiencing very little by way of significant market moves. The most interesting asset, I guess, once again, is gold, with the yellow metal trading north of $2,900 an ounce for the first time yesterday, hitting fresh record highs, which I believe is the sixth session in the last 7 that gold, in the spot market at least, has traded to a fresh record. And it does seem as if a test of $3,000 an ounce is a bit of a question of when rather than if at this moment in time. Besides that, the data docket was almost completely barren yesterday, nothing of any particular interest, but nonetheless there were plenty of comments from President Trump for market participants to get their teeth into. In no particular order, firstly, the biggest sort of what the fuck moment of the presidency so far is that Trump is going to ease the enforcement of a law which bans overseas bribes. So time to go long briefcase manufacturers and brown envelopes, I think. Basically, there is a law in the United States at the moment which makes it illegal for US firms to bribe foreign officials, which seems like quite a sensible law, to be completely honest with you. The Trump administration, though, arguing that that is putting US firms at a disadvantage, and basically is going to let them pay bribes again to foreign officials to get their own way. In terms of other bits and bobs, of course, Trump had this big interview on Fox News, which aired, overnight UK time. A few things from that. Firstly, in terms of trade, Trump has now imposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports, and he's also ended the product exclusion process, which was basically a loophole where certain things that were made of steel and aluminium could get around those tariffs. They are going to kick in from the start of March, and Trump also saying that those tariffs, and I quote here, could go higher. I think the market has become kind of desensitized to tariff news at the moment. Of course, yesterday was the third Monday in a row where we've all come to our desks to another tariff announcement. A couple of weeks ago, it was Colombia. Last week, it was Canada, China, and Mexico. This week, it's steel and aluminium. And I think it's kind of got to the point where market participants are just taking this in their stride. And also, there's a bit of an assumption that actually these are more of a negotiating tactic than anything else. On which note, Trump said that the reciprocal tariffs, which were hinted at on Friday, they are going to be announced over the next couple of days. For those who are unaware of what these reciprocal tariffs mean, this is effectively where the US is charging a different levy on imports than the country on the other side of that equation. So the example that's being used a lot is automobiles and cars. If a US vehicle is imported into the EU, you pay a tariff of 10%. If an EU made vehicle is imported into the United States, the chap in the US buying that pays a tariff of 2.5%. So effectively, what the Trump administration is saying is, if you want to charge 10% on imports of our goods, we're going to charge exactly the same on imports of your goods to what they would say is level the playing field. So of course we
Which, to be
will.
fair, isn't, that's not such a bad thing to do, right?
It's not, to be honest. It's
And
probably.
also, we have seen the EU have already come in end of last week and say they're looking to drop some tariffs, or lower some tariffs anyway,
Yeah.
because of this. So I do think this is a fair measure, and also it seems to be having the desired effect already. So
Well, I was going
yeah,
to say, it does seem like the most logical of these tariff measures
yes,
that have been put in place. And to your point there, we did hear from the White House economic advisor, Kevin Hassett. He spoke on Friday, actually, after the jobs report. And he was saying exactly what you said, which is that, reciprocal tariffs can either be we go up or the other person comes down.
yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, one thing or the other. So we'll see how that one pans out. Trump was also talking about China. He said in this Fox interview that he has spoken with China's President Xi since the inauguration, but he didn't say when they spoke, and he didn't say what they'd spoken about. So not entirely sure what's going on with that one. He also was asked in this interview whether he sees Vice President J.D. Vance as his successor, and he said no. Presumably because J.D. Vance does not have the surname Trump, it means that he cannot be his successor. Moving on slightly to the AI space, there were a few developments there yesterday. If Tom Talks Cars is on the call. Firstly, OpenAI. They are reportedly looking at an in-house chip design that will be fabricated by TSMC over in Taiwan. Of course, this is going to be a significant leap forward for OpenAI, and it's also something that would mean that they're not as reliant as they currently are on chip makers such as Nvidia and all the other folk out there. Perhaps more interestingly, when it comes to the AI space yesterday, was that we had news via the Wall Street Journal late last night that Elon Musk and a whole host of investors that are backing him had made an unsolicited bid of $97.4 billion for control of OpenAI. Now, of course, remember that back in 2015, Musk was actually a co-founder of OpenAI with Sam Altman. He then left the firm in 2019. He was basically saying that he wants OpenAI to, and I'm using his language here, return to the open source, safety-focused force for good that it once was. He also said, we will make sure that happens. The problem is his bid is about a third of what OpenAI were valued at in a recent fundraising round. So it was no surprise that was turned down relatively quickly. In fact, Sam Altman saying no thank you to Elon Musk and his takeover offer. But if he wants to sell Twitter for 9 billion quid, then he would be more than happy to buy it.
So just quickly on this, because save me going back to it in a second. So Axios have reported on this that Musk wasn't actually trying to buy OpenAI, but per se, but rather underlying the for-profit assets that Altman has, or that Altman must buy in order to reorganize the company. So they're kind of suggesting this is more Musk trolling and just kind of putting a number on paper for everyone to see what needs to be done.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
It's all very convoluted.
Yeah, massaging his ego. There's also a ridiculous number of conflicts of interest because, of course, the other thing you've got to bear in mind is every time you read a headline that has the word Musk in it, swap Musk for federal government employee is probably the easiest way to think about it. It's no longer world's richest man and very egotistical billionaire. It's employee of the federal government, which makes things quite difficult, or it would in a normal situation, but perhaps it doesn't when you've got Trump in charge. Last but by no means least, just worth mentioning, we did hear from ECB President Lagarde overnight. Not overnight, late yesterday afternoon. She was really just sticking to the script, noting that inflation is on course to return to target this year, and that the ECB are still data dependent, not pre-committing to a particular rate path, etc., etc., etc. She did, though, say that Europe has, and I quote here, immense challenges, but the solutions to those challenges are within reach. Well, she must have bloody long arms because I've got no idea what those solutions even are, let alone being able to reach them.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, also welcome back to our dear friend Zach, who's back from Thailand and then skiing. So we do have an overnight news roundup, which has just gone out on the emails. Also, big shout out to Cam for the crypto blast that will be coming along very soon. But here we go, some headlines via the overnight blast. The overnight news roundup rather, from Zach. So starting off, this is very in line with what Michael was suggesting or Michael was saying. Regarding the EU tariffs and the tit for tat with the US. The EU trade ministers, I believe the headline is set to hold a video conference on Wednesday, but we've also seen quite a significant number of headlines dropping as we've been going on air. So I think it's going to be a headline rich day, especially tomorrow. After this video conference on the steel and aluminium tariffs. Trump said he wants to increase the amount of money for the US military, a goal that runs counter to efforts from Elon Musk to slash spending. To quote, "We want to raise defense spending. I think we have to do it." Trump said in an interview with Fox News that was last week, but it was broadcast yesterday. Chinese investors are helping to drive a bull run in Hong Kong shares, ploughing 19.3 billion with a B into the financial hub this year, more than 7 times the amount they added during the same period in 2024. Sticking with China, the China auto industry body, CPCA, says that China sold 1.81 million passenger cars in January, down 12% year on year. And the CPCA says that China exported 29,535 China-made vehicles in January. Sticking in China, Chinese refined nickel exports could almost treble this year as domestic overcapacity produces yet another glut of metal that will have to be absorbed by overseas markets. The EU is preparing a radical overhaul of its next trillion with a T euro common budget, replacing dozens of programs with merged funds that would hand more spending power to capitals, calling for a more ambitious budget in size and design to meet increased spending demands on defence and hefty debt repayments. Moving to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia's NEOM, that's that mega city project, that really long thin one, that's being developed on the Red Sea coast, secured 5 billion with a B investment from a local firm to establish a 1.5 gigawatt AI data center. US oil refineries along the Gulf Coast are snubbing shipments from Mexico, complaining that Pemex, that's the Mexican oil company, is increasingly delivering crude that's unfit to make gasoline and diesel. As a reminder, not all crude is created equal. It has grades, and it sounds like the Mexican stuff is turning into a bit of a load of shit. Geopolitical news, some Trump
technical term.
Yeah, very technical term from my oil trading days. It's like gravy. Trump, and this is a quote, I believe this was late last night, if all the Gaza hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 p.m., I would say cancel the ceasefire. And I quote, "Let all hell break loose." So this is very fiery rhetoric from the Orange Man in the White House, but it shouldn't really be a surprise because he has said many times when he was campaigning, also when he was president-elect, that when he got to power, if all the hostages weren't released, then games are over, and he even suggested that the US might get involved in bombing Palestine. So let's see what happens there. Trump warned Hamas to free all hostages held in Gaza by Saturday, hours after the Palestinian militant group said it would postpone this week's scheduled release amid dispute over goods needed to provide shelter for the enclave's displaced population. Sticking with geopolitical news, Russia targeted Ukrainian gas and power facilities in strikes overnight and early Tuesday as night temperatures in Ukraine fell below minus 10 degrees C. Ukraine's gas production facilities have been damaged. That's according to Naftogaz. And free equity headlines for you. I did have more, but my dear friend Mr. Michael Brown stole my thunder on the AI stuff.
Sorry.
One that I have got to say is DeepSeek. Remember them? They raised their prices by 300%, with input tokens now costing 2 yuan per million tokens, and output tokens, costing 8 yuan per million tokens. I believe
isn't 2 yuan about 30 pence or something stupid?
Something like that. But I believe a token, I'm trying to remember when I've been told off by my developers for this. Basically, a token is like a query. So perhaps by asking it one question, it's actually conducting lots of queries to fulfill your answer.
Oh, see, my mind was, do you remember when I'm going off on a tangent here, but when you were a child and you used to go to a fun fair and you'd have, 10 tokens for £10 and it would be one token per go kind of thing. That was
Yeah,
where I
I
was
bet you
thinking
used to
of
love
those
Hook a
days.
Duck, didn't you? I bet that was your favourite game. Well,
I
funny
used
enough,
to
our dear,
indicate while driving on the Dodgems.
yeah, exactly. Checking your rear view mirror. Our dear friend Zach has actually given me a comparison for OpenAI whilst we've been talking. So the 4.0 model on OpenAI, that is 18 yuan for 1 million inputs and 73 yuan for 1 million outputs. But first price hike of many is what he's put. BP
Can
finally
we
for
just
me
price stuff in dollars or something going forwards? I
yeah,
think it
so
might
that's
be
two and a
slightly
half
easier.
dollars. $2.50 for a million input, $10 for a million output. Yeah, there you go.
Right.
BP has pledged to fundamentally reset its strategy and improve its performance as the struggling oil major reported a steep drop in profits for the final quarter of last year. It still launched a 1.75 billion with a B quarterly buyback. Updates expected at its capital markets day on April 26th. That's gone to the FT and the Wall Street Journal. And that is it from me. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Ryan. The other thing to bear in mind with BP is, of course, Elliott with their stake now. They
Ah,
are,
yes.
well, we don't really know what they're looking to do, but presumably break them up. That's usually Elliott's strategy. So we'll see what happens there. In any case, moving on to today, the data docket is barren once more. In fact, this week's calendar of economic releases doesn't really get going until tomorrow lunchtime when we have the latest CPI figures due out of the United States. That said, there are a few things that participants may find interesting as we move through the next 24 hours or so. The central bank speaking calendar is a busy one. Fed Chair Powell is heading to the Senate today to begin 2 days of congressional testimony. He is highly likely to just stick to the script that he outlined at the January FOMC meeting, which was, of course, about a fortnight or so ago. And also do bear in mind that the Senate and also the House testimony, they are generally used as an opportunity by lawmakers for a bit of grandstanding, ask Powell some slightly stupid questions that they can then clip up on their social media and post out to claim that they're doing a good job to their constituents. We tend to rarely get actually any insight in terms of monetary policy from these events. Besides Powell, we also hear from the Fed's Hammack, Williams, and Bowman as we move throughout the remainder of the day. We also hear from the ECB's Schnabel, as well as Bank of England Governor Bailey, who is speaking on the subject of whether we are underestimating changes in financial markets. And we're also due to hear from the BOE's Catherine Mann, who, of course, was an Uber hawk and then became an Uber dove by voting for a 50 basis point cut at the MPC meeting last Thursday. In fact, she is speaking right now, and she has said, and I'm just reading the headlines here, she opted for a 50 basis point cut to, quote, cut through the noise, but that she favours continued restrictiveness in the future. So good luck trying to square that circle. In terms of other bits and bobs, we do have some supply from the United States. A $58 billion 3-year note auction is at 6 o'clock London time this evening. And corporate earnings season continues. The pace of corporate reports slowing somewhat. We are now past all of the mega cap earnings until Nvidia on the 26th of February. Nonetheless, today we hear from the likes of Shopify and Coca-Cola before the market open. And after the close, we hear from Supermicro Computing, who obviously had that big accounting scandal recently. And we also hear from Lyft as well after the closing bell tonight. And that is your lot from me this morning.
Wonderbug. Thank you very much, Mr. Michael Brown. Good to be back, and good to see Zach back as well. And yeah, if you are trading today, keep it tight, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Have a good one.
We will indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.